Okay, so today I am chatting to my friend Kenroy, who is originally from Grenada, but isn't in Grenada right now. Where in the world are you, Kenroy?
Yeah, I'm coming to you from Morocco right now, so on the coast in Rabat, so just having a great time here.
And just in case anyone thinks he's lying, can you do like a 180 just so we can cry?
Give you a nice little view of the sunset coming in there.
Empty beaches. What a place.
Yeah, you know, the Rona has everyone indoors, so.
Yeah, what a place to survive the pandemic. And literally, as you spoke, a torrential downpour started outside my window. So I'm glad at least one of us is making it work. Tough life.
It's a hard life, but someone has to do it, you know?
Yeah, fight the fight, Kenroy.
And that's what I'm here for.
So I've known you for a while, but for folks tuning in and curious, like, who is this guy? Can you introduce yourself? Who are you and what brings you joy?
Okay, that's a good question. All right, so my name is Kenroy. I grew up in Grenada. I stayed there until I was 10. Then I moved to New York and, went to high school, did college there. Started doing web development, web design, and sort of a lot of digital technology. So like spanning the entire spectrum of IT. I sort of worked my way through that. And I ended up just settling on web development because that one had a little bit more impact than the others. That one had the ability to touch a lot more people than the other areas where it was more stationary. With web development, you can build a project and thousands or millions of people can see it. And if you attach that to a message, then that makes it a lot more impactful in what you're doing. So answering the second question, what brings me joy? For me, it's always seeing other people happy. So anything that I can do to help make the people around me either happy. And I mean, a lot of the things, you don't see it because of what either my industry or my personality sometimes. It doesn't exude I want to help people. But I guess that's really to my introverted nature where I'm not outwardly expressive, but internally I feel a lot of what affects myself and the people around me. So anywhere that I can help alleviate that problem, I try to do that. And I try my best to do that with technology and whatever other areas that I can do that with.
Super, nice answer. I like the idea of solving problems or creating joy through technology. I guess there's lots of scope to do that in different ways. So one of the things that I've literally just found out in our pre-chat was that you were born in Grenada. I thought you were like a die-hard New Yorker who just popped over and gave it a shot, but no, I got it all wrong. So where were you born and where did you grow up and what were your first 10 years on the island like?
So yeah, I mean, I grew up in Crochu, well, Mama Ken, went to school in Crochu RC, and my time there was, it was exciting. I started school, I think 1 year early. So for most of, I think up till Form 6, I was 1 year ahead of most of the other students. I was just about to head out to, I believe, secondary school when I left Grenada to come, to New York. And I guess, it was time for me to go spend time with my mom. So there was that. And I guess I started getting into trouble. So grandma had enough, so she shipped me off to my mother. But yeah, so that was really my youth. I really enjoyed the time back home. I mean, in many ways, back then you were allowed to be a child and to go outside, play, and really just enjoy yourself. You still had the Caribbean life where you still had strict parents and so on. The community was sort of always looking after you. So there's always that element. But So yeah, I mean, that was most of my youth, and then I left to New York around 10 years old. And the culture is very different. So I mean, I was still young enough to adapt to the new culture without it being much of a problem. I wasn't solidified into like Grenadian culture, so I guess the transition was a lot easier for me. Whether I was like integrated into the culture. I mean, most people ask me where is my accent from. It's a mix of like a U.S. accent and like old British. So it's a weird mixture, but like elements of like Grenada and the U.S. just combined. But yeah.
Nice. So yeah, I'm really bad at judging. I just hear American, but I guess if I was American, I would hear the other bits.
Yeah.
And so like I'm super interested in one, what did you do as naughty? But two, how do you feel that spending your primary education in Grenada, how has that shaped you? Because of where I'm at in my life, education is like a really definitive thing in some ways. And I guess I have certain conceptions of what I think education in Grenada might be like and how that might impact someone in terms of the way in which they see the world and how expansive and risk-taking they're willing to be. But that's just assumptions. So it'd be super cool to hear from you, like what the experience was like for you and what your reflections on the pros and cons of education in Grenada are.
Okay. Again, that's a very interesting question because I have a lot of teachers in my family. So you're expected to excel, but you're also given the freedom to sort of explore a little bit. So, you know, you had your set curriculum that you have to follow, but you were kind of forced to, or just encouraged to explore outside of what you normally do. And that was like when you were younger. I mean, it might have changed when you're older because you're getting older. You have to pick something and like follow that path. But back then, you were allowed to. And I mean, for me, I probably was allowed to get away with a lot more things than most kids, because I guess most adults saw me as the good kid. But you know, you always have your ways of getting around getting around that by anyway, I'm not going to rat myself out too much here, but yeah, I mean, back then, there were a lot of things because I like when I was in Grenada, they had the computer room. They just got it, but what happened is I don't think they had a teacher to continuously like like teach the students. So most of the time it was just empty. I knew it was there, and I was I was one of the cohorts of students that got introduced to it very early around gaming and just learning from that. So I guess in many ways that very short time period sort of awoke something in me. It took me a while to get to hold on to it and figure out what it was. But I've always enjoyed just dealing with technology. And that sort of carried me into adulthood. But now, I mean, in many ways, the education that we have in Grenada is world class. Depends on where you're coming from. And it varies drastically. So you have students that top of their class do very well and can go on to any one of the top universities in the world. But a large swath of the population, I think, it's just a place to go to, during the day. And it's not seen as an opportunity to broaden your horizon. It's more of well, I have to go because ultimately it's illegal for me to not be here. Um, so if you feel that way, the lessons that you would learn from it is very different than someone who knows the value of it and wants to make the best of it. And I think we do a pretty bad job of relating what we learn in school to what is out in the real world. If we do a better job of doing that, I think it would make it a lot easier for me to like sit down and study or figure out what I want to do while I'm in there, and I'll better be able to utilize my time in focusing on what I need to learn to get me to where I need to be. But we do a pretty terrible job of making that connection, and in many ways, I think that's a global problem. It's not inherent to Grenada, but yeah, I mean, it works depending on who you're surrounded by. If you have great parents and they're involved in your life, that you will do okay. If your parents are not interested, or it's not a priority, then it will show in how you go about it and the grades you get and so on. So that parental involvement and that support is very important in anything that you do, and whether it's school, life, relationships, if you don't have that, then it's most likely fail.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think, yeah, it does feel like a universal problem, because I think it's the same issues here, that whole sort of learning for the sake of getting grades versus learning for life. It seems two very different routes. It's good that you've kind of squashed some of my assumptions. My assumption is that like education in Grenada is very like regimented and get your subjects, but it's good to hear that perhaps there's more fluidity.
Again, it can, for the vast majority it is, but it depends on the teachers that you get. Like if you get a good teacher, that can, again, it's universal. If you get a good teacher that's involved in what you learn and they see that you excel in certain areas and they're like, okay, well, we're not going to keep you or hold you back. We'll push you a little bit ahead. Like it depends on the teacher. And, if you have a teacher that's not able to pick up on, oh, okay, he seems pretty bored, let me like push him, or he's getting into trouble because he's bored, let me kick him out of the class. It depends on the teacher.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was moved up a year as well when I was a kid. Was it a good thing, do you think, in hindsight looking back?
Which part? Getting pushed?
Yeah, skipping a year.
Well, over my lifetime I skipped 4 grades, but
Nice.
It's a good thing because you get out, but I would say if you focus too much on the grades, the social development can take a hit. So there are years that were vital to like really tuning the like understanding like social development that I kind of glossed over a little bit. So if I were to do it again, maybe I would have like slowed that down. But that's always something you can learn or not. I don't really know, but it depends. But for me, I think I probably would have done that a little bit differently.
Yeah.
The second time around.
For me, I don't know. I don't know if I do. I mean, I don't know if I had a choice. My mum just told me that's what I was doing. But yeah, it's interesting. It does. I think it does define you a little bit for a certain amount of time. It does define you. People see you differently. But for me, I don't know. I think I would be more rounded if I'd gone more slowly. But shit happens. You get on with it. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So your experience in Grenada sounds delightful, your early experience, and the New York bit. I'm going to skip through that in a way to ask you, maybe you can answer it through answering this question, which is what made you come back? Like so many people just want to get the hell out of Grenada. You had that chance, you got the passport, you were there. What made you want to come back at the age of 28?
Like working in New York City, you get to meet a lot of people, and when you're in the thick of like the heat of things, like New York City tech scene, I realized that we were focusing on these minute problems that might change someone's life or might make a small difference in someone's life in New York. For example, we were really pushing digital video back then. That was like the early days of digital video, and like the amount of effort that went into that, like the amount of technology that went into that. I was like, okay, this is fascinating. What if we took like a small percentage of the knowledge that we put into these, you know, like large companies and applied it to the Grenada, and like find interesting ways of using technology, or applying a different way of thinking about problems to like fix those things. So, you know, that was my thinking, you know, after like spending time going through the role of like making money in New York City, kind of like, yeah, you can make all this money, but like, cool, what are you doing with it, you know? For me, it kind of became empty for a while. So I was like, let me take a break and like come back and like try to apply this thing, because it's in the back of your head, like a little bit of what I know could be applied in many other ways in the region. So that was really the inspiration for me. And it was also like looking at like the financial downturn in 2017, and like looking at that, like it didn't affect me. It didn't affect me at all, really. So that it gave you sort of an insular look at how technology is and like what it can do to like help. And then even as we go through COVID now, the thinking there's so many ways it can be applied to help us, but we don't necessarily do it until it's too late. I mean, you know, if you look at where a lot of efforts are put in and investments right now, they're small incremental changes to these technology companies. I mean, you had the evolution of Facebook, then Instagram came around, Snapchat, then Instagram, and like they're all sort of building on small changes of each other, and they're not really making any broad societal improvements. And that's a lot of resources that is backing them, but we're not seeing the benefits. You know, like now the social dilemma came out, and we're like, yeah, we're just like screwing up a bunch of people, knowing that, okay, yes, we're smart and we're using technology in a way that's not exactly beneficial to the vast majority of people. It makes a small group of people a lot of money, but the rest of us are kind of just like, it's, you know, we're like little mice in the cages, just going for like the little dopamine hit. Like, yeah, we'll just keep doing that, and then they know this, and we know, okay, you look at that and you're like, okay, we have the power to change social behaviors for the better, and this is what we're doing with it. You know, so looking at that from that, like within the industry, is like, how can we utilize that same thinking to actually improve society for the better? Because we have a lot of problems that we need to face, but we're not looking of ways of like, how do you convince a bunch of people that we need to do something about global warming? You know, global warming, like that's a problem. You know, but in many ways you can be seen as like an alarmist, of like, it's not a great problem, we can fix it tomorrow. But if everyone is thinking that same way, not much is going to happen. And if you're trying to mobilize 7.5 billion people to change their, you know, their behaviors daily, that's going to take a very long time. You know, like if you go into history, like we've had the Industrial Revolution, and then a lot of people are still trying to catch up to the Industrial Revolution. You know, the US, Europe, they're far beyond that. They've been industrialized, but you have China coming online now, and the carbon emissions are going up like crazy. And then India's coming online, and like you have a lot of other emerging markets coming online. If we don't deal with those problems, well, we're off Schitt's Creek. But that's just one example of things that we can utilize technology for to really just improve our situation before it's too late.
Yeah, maybe it's already too late. But anyway, yeah. What was I going to ask you next? I was going to ask you if you had, when you decided to come back, if you had an idea as to a specific problem that you wanted to tackle. Like, what was your approach when you came back to Grenada after all that time? Do you have a strategy?
To be honest, there was no particular problem. The first thing I did was I met up with my cousin Aaron, because my grandma, when I first moved back, she was like, "Oh, your cousin is looking to start a chocolate company." I was like, "Oh, okay, interesting." So he came over to the house, and we were just talking, and he's planning to move back. He was there a year prior to me moving back, and then we were talking. He was like, "Yeah, I came back. I was just trying to get things set up," and so I was like, "All right, cool. I'm planning to move back as well." And with that, we started a small group called Grenstar, and we, for me personally, I started just talking to business people around the island of like, what problems did they have when they were starting a business in Grenada? What did they learn, through the process of doing that? What can they tell us that can, help us make that process easier? And through talking to a lot of them, I realized that the support network for a lot of these entrepreneurs just isn't there, because the sharing of information it's not, you have to know someone to get access to that information. And if you don't, you'll have a hard time doing that. And access to information ultimately is the key to a lot of things, like access to information and a network. Like once you have that, it makes it a lot easier to achieve things. So, we started Grenstar with the idea of making that process easier. So like sharing ideas, getting access to people who are doing things, kind of inspiring each other to do, if you're on the fence about starting something, trying to get other people that are doing things and they can like help you get through those hurdles and bring a sense of community around that. Because being an entrepreneur, you realize you spend a lot of time alone. And, in one thing I've also learned in Grenada is that if you're going to go down the path of an entrepreneur, you're probably going to be, ostracized is a strong word, but you'll probably be like relegated to the sidelines. Your family's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you wasting your time doing this? Like, why don't you get a real job and like stick to that?" Like, that's what you have to deal with. So like, if you can have a group of supportive people with you that can help you, like, all right, your family is probably not going to be interested in, motivating you to do this, but you have a group that they understand what you're going through and they can help you to like get through those tough, downtimes. So that was the idea of like what we wanted. So that was my way of learning about problems that people had, and ways that we could apply technology to do that. So like having that community, learning from them, figuring out what problems they had, sort of like gathering information over time. And that's really where we started just getting ideas for a lot of these things as we were talking through people. Yeah.
Cool. And so I'm trying to think how to position this in terms of people who are thinking about moving to Grenada and understanding what the context is like, because I guess if you're just doing a Google search, you'll come across something like GIDC. Am I freezing? I might be freezing. You'll come across something like GIDC, which in theory should be like the one-stop shop for all information and connecting people. And what role does an institution, or just to spell out, that's the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation. What role does that entity play, and how useful have you found it to be in your endeavors in Grenada?
GIDC is very helpful if you are driven to get your information. So if you're able to do your research, they'll be a good resource to sort of complement that. And I mean, for us, they've if you find a good person within there that's knowledgeable, they can really give you a lot of information. They're not able to, it's not really a one-stop shop. They can point you in the right direction, and give you support in certain areas. But for the vast majority of people, they're probably not going to be very helpful. And setting up a company is a very small piece of what it means to run a business. That's just a one step. Like most of the time, it's just like I need training and doing sales and doing a lot of these other business functions. they're not going to help in that area. They can help you get set up. They can help you like establish the business, like put the structures in place, get your accounting right, which are valid, you know, they're very helpful functions, but the vast majority of the time you need help in like doing the day-to-day, like getting access to funding, you know, figuring out what it takes, like, you know, to make my, you know, my company profitable. They could help in that area. If it's, I think a lot of the times, if it comes down to the problem being well known, if it's something new, you're kind of out of luck there. So, you know, if you want to set up a shop, then it's kind of well structured of like what you need to do. If you want to start up a new tech company, that's a very different thing for them. You know, they can point you, say, if you want to do something with banking, they might be able to point you to a contact at, you know, the ECCB. But in many ways, a lot of the policies and institutions are just not there for like they're not future ready just yet. They're getting there, but they're more reactive as opposed to sort of thinking ahead and like planning for these things. So, you know, if you want to be the person that comes and, you know, build a bank, and, you know, they'll probably come after you, but you might get pretty far before they come after you, and then they'll start regulating. But because the regulations are not there, so you can get away with a lot of things. And you know, I had to deal with that, and we were thinking of like starting an investment fund. I mean, we contacted the financial regulations company of like, what are the rules that you have in doing something like that? There are no rules on the books. So if you're doing it, ultimately you're doing it at your own risk. So, but it's also a thing where like, if you don't have the structures, you're most likely not going to motivate people to want to do it, because if I have money, I'm not going to put it into a place where you don't have the financial structures to invest in that particular instrument, right? So in many ways, not being able to see that and wonder like, well, why are we not getting the right investors? Kind of, it makes things a little bit difficult. But that's what I mean, not having the people in the right places to think ahead of like, how do we set things up so people can feel welcomed to want to invest. You know, like we've had conversations with investors, and they'll look at it, it's like, okay, if I were to give you $8 million, where can I put this money? It happens, but most of it tends to be with banks. And the number one role of a bank is to minimize risk. Now, you want to now bring investors, well, you want to put investments for new or untested ideas with someone that works in a bank. It was like, our idea is to minimize risk to zero. When you're an entrepreneur, your risks are always above zero. So they're just not there, you know? And so those are just some of the things that, you know, that we need. Like, there are some bodies, but they're not broad enough to really take on what needs to be done. And that's just my, you know, honest take on it. We could do a lot better in structuring it, but I just don't think they see the pressure in doing it just yet. Or maybe they do and they just don't want to. I don't know. But that was my experience of it. And, you know, with GIDC, you know, from talking to a lot of people, I keep hearing the story that, I don't want to be too negative, but they tend to say no to your idea when you're talking to them, but someone within the company would probably run with your idea and try to implement it themselves. And I've heard it from multiple sources, you know, but I don't have that problem. So I'm just putting that out there based on what I've told from other people that I've spoken to, and I've heard it from multiple people. So I'm assuming that there is some truth to it, but I do not have any first-hand experience with that myself. But, you know, just one of those things you pick up from talking to a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's a super important thing to be aware of, whether it's factually correct or not. Just to kind of be aware that that is apparently has happened is useful background information. And so, as we start this conversation, it's clear that you are not in the Caribbean, yet you're speaking to me as a part of a Move to the Caribbean series. I'm super curious for you to condense the numerous conversations we've had in the past year or so. What are the main challenges that you encountered when it came to setting up or establishing a business in Grenada?
Setting up the company was relatively easy. Getting the paperwork and so on, that was easy. The hard part, and I think with most things, are with people. Like getting people to buy into what you're doing. That's the hard part. And from trying it a couple times, you ultimately need to have a champion that will help you get that buy-in. And as I mentioned, like me coming back, I never really had that network of local, like a local community that I can use. So like coming in fresh, not exactly having that family name that screams, we've done business before, makes it a little bit difficult for you. So people aren't really open to the idea of starting something new unless you come from a well-known family. So there is that. And I think that will probably be the hardest thing for you. Like even opening a bank account or getting a loan, that will take you far. Like just knowing that your family name, you're like, okay, well, we can trust that. Which there is some truth to it, and I get why. But when you're trying to move beyond that, there has to be some sort of separation between the old ways of doing things and trying to move beyond that. Because if you're going to fall back on that all the time, you're going to miss out on a lot of potential opportunities that could have helped move forward. But again, that's just me from my trials. Like we've done it, we've pushed it. We had the Oasis, the floating bar in Mount Hartland Bay. The biggest thing we had there was access, for one, getting people to it, and I guess also having some protection against other businesses in the area, because we had a millionaire and a billionaire who were both trying to take us down. So that didn't exactly make our task easier. And we've spoken to a few folks in government of like what can be done about it. But again, if you're not greasing any palms, you're gonna have a hard time. But again, it could also come down to the fact that the idea just wasn't ready for the local market. So there's that. So I'm not blaming anyone for it not working out. But it just, as you said, like what are the things that we've learned? A lot of people have that problem of like trying to start up. Everyone's like, oh, that's a great idea. Okay, would you buy it? I don't know. A year down the line, like, what happened? And it was like, well, yeah, I closed it down. It's like, why? I was going to buy from you. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't do it while I was still alive. So, it's kind of hard to come to me now after I've closed it and say, well, yeah, I was going to do that. You can say anything you want, but a was is definitely not going to keep me alive. So those are just some of the things and, that we've learned. But there are a few other things, but I think those are the two main, the two very important ones.
Okay, got fruit flies. And ultimately, what was it? Why did you decide to? Why did you leave, Kenroy? Why did you leave?
Oh man. Honestly, it just came down to the frustration, and things take a while, and they take money. So you have to be able to sustain yourself for years before you really see a return. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just trying to do business without being flush with cash, and not having that network is inherently hard. So for me, it's like, okay, I can keep doing this and burning money for a while, or I can just keep doing what I'm doing and make money, going back to what I'm used to. So doing web development and just keep on doing that, but this time on a larger scale. So for me, like the mindset really is, it's just not there. Like we want the change, but not too much change. And for me, growing up in New York and trying to like do a business in Grenada, it was just difficult. And I'm also an impatient person, so there's also that. Yeah, so for me, it was just like, let me go for a larger market where there is more acceptance to what I'm trying to work on, and then maybe we'll return to the Caribbean. Because I mean, also the dark side is that we're followers, we're not exactly leaders, and accepting that makes it a lot easier to like start a business somewhere else and then come back to Grenada when you're established. Yeah, so that was just my take on it. So this somehow brought me to the African continent, and I'll probably be here for a while. It's, like 1.7 billion people compared to 41 million. It's just a larger market to play in.
Yeah, perfect. And I really want to come on to what you're doing next, but I'm just super curious. When you came back, and even when you think of yourself now, do you feel like a Grenadian? How did you navigate the whole thing, like psychologically, spiritually, culturally? How are you weaving through it all?
I'll be honest with you. I've never really felt at home anywhere, but at the same time, I can fit in anywhere. So for me, if I have to, I'm here now. If I have to go back to Grenada, I can try, but you never really feel at home, and you just get used to that feeling. You can use that to your advantage, or you can let it bring you down. But for me, it's I realize I like moving around, interacting with different people, and that is just the discomfort in not feeling at home anywhere. It's just like you want to keep going. I mean, you can, but sometimes you just don't want to. you know.
Yeah. And so now you are in Morocco. Are you staying in Morocco? And what are you doing? What are you up to now? And does it have any connection to the Caribbean at all?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm working on a company called Luhu right now, and we're building out a resource network for the Caribbean. We're starting off in the Caribbean, primarily in Trinidad, and the goal is to scale across the region. And once we sort of capture that market, then hop over the pond to the African continent. I'd like to start here in Morocco as well. So from here, sort of scale across the region. So that's the plan, but we just want to make sure that we really understand the local market in the Caribbean first, because they do share certain things in common. So once we understand that, then we can sort of take that learning and sort of transfer it over to what we're trying to do here.
And what does it do? What is the product?
Okay, so it's a very simple thing where we're using the Instagram model to get people to explore things that they need. So whether that's food, buying new products, looking for services, they can, I, as a business owner, I can post on there. I can tell people within my area. So it's location based. So I can say, show me all the services, products, and so on in a 5 to 10 mile radius from where I live. And based on that, if there's anything interesting, I can contact that person and negotiate on pricing and the location of where I can go pick that up, or if they have delivery, we can organize that via text. So we're starting off with a very basic product, but as we grow and we realize people want to automate a lot of it, because you're not going to be able to manually negotiate all the prices with everyone. That's going to become unmanageable at some point. we're going to find ways of building infrastructure to automate that. So whether it's giving that person who has 10 products, like a store, where I can go on and just buy it from there and gather all the details, and then I ship it out to the person or I deliver it. That's really where we're trying to go. So think of doing that for products, restaurants, even your neighborhood shop. Like if I want to check what what the shopkeeper has, I can go on there, check it, put in an order for it, go pick it up or have it delivered, depending on what they're willing to offer, and just give them the tools to do that. So looking at from the basic platform, we'll monitor who our power users are, whether they're selling products, doing service, like offering services, and then tailor it to fit those needs. So that's really where we are now, and we're slowly scaling up, and we're growing slowly. We already have 100 people testing the app right now. Looking to launch in the App Store in a couple weeks, and hopefully scale up to about 10,000 in the first couple of months. So we're looking to really push that out because we know that there's appetite for it, and COVID has really made it glaringly obvious. So we're just trying to find ways of offering services and just helping people to take advantage of that. And as Christmas comes up, we want to give some hope that there's some way to make money, and hopefully we can help people do that.
Perfect. And if folks want to find out more, oh yeah, just noticed. If folks want to find out more about the platform, whether they want to be part of the early users or are interested in investing, how do they find out about it? Where do they connect?
Okay, so they can go on the website. It's luhu.me, so luhu.me. And you can also email me at kenroy@luhu.me, so KENROY@luhu.me. And I can either give you a walkthrough, give you an invite to the app. You can sign up to the early access list on the website. If you want to be a partner, you definitely can reach out to me directly, and then we can organize that. And yeah, so those are the main ways. I mean, we have a few other channels, but those are the main ones if you're looking for information quickly.
Okay, cool. And then 2 quick questions before you descend into total darkness. With the company having a regional focus on the Caribbean at the moment, what are you noticing as sort of key trends? I'm particularly thinking for folks who might be interested in moving and setting up their own business. What are you noticing as like the trends and opportunities in this kind of mid-COVID? We can't say post-COVID, can we? This mid-COVID moment.
Okay. 2 things that really stand out. The transition to digital services. So a lot of the, whether it's government, private companies, like being able to access things digitally is one. The one that ties directly to that is digital banking. And as we move into, we've been in the globalized world for a very long time, but we're sort of lagging in the technology side on the banking area in the region. But we need to sort of integrate with the global financial system where, we want people in the region to have access to a global market. In order to do that, we need to make sure that the banking system, the financial system are able to talk to the global financial system. So if I'm in the Caribbean, I'd like to accept payments from someone in New York or someone. There are ways to do it, but you have to jump through a lot of hoops to make that happen right now. And, if we're able to figure out both the digital platform side and getting people connected and being able to do, cross-border payments, I think those would be a great help to getting people to be a little bit more entrepreneurial and help themselves to improve, because there's so much government can do, and government's probably not going to do something that requires a lot of effort. I mean, some they are, but it takes a while to get there. But if we can allow entrepreneurs to do a lot of it, then it takes the pressure off of government to do that.
Awesome. And we have light. I wasn't sure if you had a power cut.
No, it's no power cut. I'm just like sitting outside and there's like no light outside. Probably not going to do that well.
Yeah, no, it's better. It's much better. So yeah, the last question was, what? Yeah, I'm not going to limit it to a number, but what advice would you give to someone looking to move to Grenada, to set up a business, and to have a decent quality of life? So it doesn't. I mean, I'm looking for advice on like the business side, but also the kind of balance, how to like not lose your mind and how to not be frustrated and have to move overseas.
Okay. I'll say do your research first. Talk to a lot of people. Get a very basic version of what you're trying to do and get people to buy that. If you can get people to buy it, then you know you have a business. If you can't, don't do it. It's like basically that, you know, if you cannot get anyone to buy something, don't invest more money than you need to, because you will be in a lot of hurt.
Perfect. And lastly, when are you coming back? I need someone with decent taste in music on the island. You're the only person I know. When are you coming back?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I'll be back hopefully before, I don't know, sometime before or after my birthday in March. I don't know. I honestly do not know when I'll be back on the island, but it'll be soon, sometime next year.
And what are you gonna do? You're gonna like come and go? You're gonna have like a little base in Grenada and
Definitely come and go. I don't see myself being there for too long anymore. I'll come spend some time, but you know, I'll also be spending time in Trinidad because we're building the company there. So I'll be in close proximity, but you know, between Morocco, New York, and the Caribbean is really where I'll be bouncing around at the moment.
sounds like a dream. Love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. Your developments are super interesting, and I think your story is really honest, because I think, you know, quite often people can have this dream of like, yeah, I'm going to move to the Caribbean and my life is going to look great on Instagram, but actually it's not that simple. So if you can get your head around that beforehand, it can save you a lot of stress and heartache. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, yeah, thanks again for having me, and it was a pleasure talking as always. So hopefully someone can hear this and they'll learn from a little bit of pain that I've had to go through. So
Yeah, super. Thanks, Kenroy.